As we settle into the second half of the year, the government published its annual tax code revision this afternoon. One of the focuses was on addressing structural risks like the low birth rate, as we just heard. Our finance correspondent Moon Hye-ryeon joins me in the studio. Hye-ryeon, tell us more about this risk and how tax code is being changed in response.
Well, Jung-min, one of the fundamental issues the country is currently facing is its low birth rate. Last year, the fertility rate, which indicates the average number of children a woman will have in her lifetime, fell to 0.72, prompting the government to declare it as a state of emergency. Here is what the first Vice Minister of Economy and Finance said in a briefing today.
We must actively respond to structural risks, such as the population crisis and the decline of the country's potential growth rate in order for our economy to thrive.
A new addition to the tax code reflects the government's goal to increase support for newlyweds and parents. For newlyweds who register their marriage between 2024 and 2026, each person will be given a tax credit of 500,000 Korean won, or roughly $362, meaning that a couple can save 1 million won on taxes together. A tax credit is an amount of money that taxpayers can subtract directly from the taxes they owe. In response to doubts on how effective providing tax credits could be for married couples in boosting the birth rate, one expert said this.
I think a better move would be to concentrate tax exemptions on people who have children and then raise the tax exemption from raise the per child tax exemption to a higher level rather than just give tax exemption to every young couple indiscriminately.
And this is exactly what the government plans to do. The child tax credit already in place will be raised by 100,000 Korean won, meaning that it will now amount to 250,000 won for one child aged 8 or older, 300,000 for 2 children, and 400,000 for 3 children.
Yes, Hye-ryeon, and other than married couples and parents, what other groups are the authorities focusing on?
Right, so another big revision is to the inheritance tax code that's been in place for nearly a quarter of a century. It currently ranges between 10 to 50% on taxable income, which is among the highest among members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, second only to Japan. The OECD average stands at 15%, and an expert explains why high inheritance tax rates can cause issues.
For example, small and medium-sized companies, which are family-owned, some of them had to go out of business because they could not find other managers or owners who will take over the business. And when their parents wanted to leave the businesses to their children, they found that they could not afford to because of the high inheritance tax.
So in order to help SMEs, the government is proposing to lower the highest inheritance tax rate to 40% and the minimum tax base be raised to 200 million Korean won from the current 100 million. It also aims to abolish the premium that's placed on majority stakeholders that inherit stocks of family-owned conglomerates. Currently, this stands at 20%, meaning that South Korea's inheritance tax rate can reach up to 60%. At the start of the year, President Yoon Suk-yeol identified this as a key factor behind the so-called Korea discount, which refers to a phenomenon in which the value of companies listed on the Korean stock market is lower than that of other major countries. This is because it creates an incentive for the current owners of the company to try and maintain low stock prices so that if those stocks are passed to their children, the inheritance tax will be lower.
There's quite a change. And so what's the road ahead for the tax reform bill?
Absolutely. So there's still some way to go before these revisions are actually enacted. The bill will be submitted to the National Assembly in September, and these revisions could take effect starting next year. The revisions are expected to bring about a decrease in tax revenue of about 4.4 trillion won, or over $3 billion over the next 5 years. South Korea suffered from a tax revenue shock with slumps in the property market and corporate activity last year, but conditions are expected to improve with stronger exports and policies to promote investment and consumption.
Right, Hye-ryeon, thank you for the wrap-up.
Thank you for having me.